So there's always been the aspect of people simply enjoying themselves. It is a culture of experience. To use one of my colleagues' terms, experience is a you experience it, right? It makes you feel good, it makes you feel happy, which is why people like it and they participate. So, which is why some people will talk about their experiences in the big bands that they play in, and they tend not to, if you tell them about traditional masses, or kind of frown, I'm not into that, I like my pretty mass. They like the experience of it. But what they don't know, or what they don't appreciate, is that the same way they're experiencing their mass is the same way these characters, or these exponents of the different aspects of the mass experiencing it. There's that sense of fun, that sense of life, vibrance, vitality, that sense of a visceral kind of feeling inside you, right? Romance. You know what I mean when I talk about romance, right? That was there. That is in the experience of the modern masquerade, as in the experience of the older forms of masquerade. That's also there in the experience of the traditional characters who want it, right? Some of the traditional characters, right? So you put a full step on equal. Some of the traditional characters are rooted in some older ritual expressions. Some of them born from the plantation slavery era, many of them from way before, right? Peoples who came brought these expressions with them, right? And for a majority of them have their home in that African experience. So they brought their rituals with them. So the act of masquerading is not a phenomenon born in slavery, as people like to think. And the act of masquerading is also not a phenomenon that's exclusive to Africa, right? All cultures and civilizations have it. An act of masquerading and this performance and ritual and this type of carnival-like expression. So I'm saying that, and this might be where you want to identify eras when you're asking the questions of significant changes, because nobody really talks about what happened or what carnival was like. I mean, there are writings about it. If you look at Errol Hill's book, I think it's Andrew Carr is his name, and Andrew Carr and Andrew Pierce wrote a book as well on carnival, documented I think in the 1950s. But the carnival they talk about, or the carnival a lot of us talk about and have these light memories of, and what people want to go back to, is really the carnival between the 1950s and the mid-1970s, 1980s. And what happened there that made it so significant? And that's when we started to get mixed up of culture and history and meaning and being Trinidadian and portraying, is that it was very much infused in our sense of identity. In that, in the birthing of and coming to being of a nation as an independent nation, these carnival expressions were appropriated. When I say appropriate, I mean that they were deliberately used, right, by intellectuals and the upper black middle class and those who were pushing for us to be independent. They were deliberately used. There's literature out there on Eric Williams's direct connection with steel pan and his sponsorship, not necessarily in terms of money, but in terms of the ideals of it as an expression of Trinidad. Cyril L. James in some of his writings talk about our carnival, what it expresses, right? And they are not the only ones, there are others. If you look at read Lovelace, Earl Lovelace's work, A lot of his work talks about what Carnival means to us in terms of cultural identity, right? He was the head of the department in Creative Arts. Royal Gibbons talks about that. Kim Johnson, he is a fellow in UTT, and they are modern ones. So it's the same kind of, so the arguments you hear from Alan Mitchell, Alan McFarlane, and all of these who talk about what is being lost, they're really talking about that marriage between this cultural expression, which existed before it, and the idea of being Trinidadian. Right? So the angst that develops now is really an angst in terms of how people view the state of the nation, how people view what is happening, how their aspirations, and how that is reflected in the carnival. Because in that time block I spoke about, 50s, mid-70s, there was a lot more thought and intellectual rigor on how this society can develop on its own, what it means to be Trinidadian, what is indigenous of us, what is organic, right? And when people comment on the mass, I sometimes wonder if they're not so much commenting on, more so on the state of society and that attention to what it means to be Trinidadian or our place in the world, right? Because the mass simply reflects where our psyche is. If it is in you to spend 6 months to build a masquerade, or 8 months to build a masquerade, that speaks about where your position is in the world, that is what is reflected in the mass. If it is in you to not invest that kind of time and download an image or pay for an image and resell that because there's a different bottom line for you, that simply reflects on what your focus is. And